Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. And in this episode, in an attempt to try to do some more top 10 videos, at least monthly, for this month, I would like to talk about a few games that I think I either want an expansion for, or there is an expansion available, but I haven't gotten to it yet. When I was making this list, it was quite difficult to find games that I really enjoy that have not had some sort of expansion made for it already. So I'm including some games that I haven't gotten the chance to play its expansion or expansions yet. Oftentimes, these really successful games, of which I enjoy, have promotional material that are released during conventions or otherwise, and so I won't include those specifically. I am looking for a full expansion in order to count it for my list. And of course, we're going to talk about a few Rosenberg games that I think would need an expansion. I think a lot of his games do have expansions, and I've played most of them, but there are a few out there, especially his big box games, that have not had an expansion yet, so I would love to see some additional material for that too. So let's get into it. This is going to be somewhat informal without much of a script, but the first game and the first category are games that need an expansion. And the first one is Lowlands. I'm mentioning this first because I have talked about this game extensively over the past couple of months. I think this game is really fun, and I'll give a quick overview too. So Lowlands, it is a Euro game where everyone is playing a worker placement tableau building farming game, where not only are you competing with other players to build out your farm using individual tiles, but also you're trying to semi-cooperatively build out the dike, so that way you score the game differently based off of how well that dike is and how, as a team, you keep up with the rising tides, which may or may not alter your game for the better or worse. Now, this game has been mentioned by the designers that there is an expansion in the works, and so this is kind of like a hybrid game that needs an expansion but already kind of has one in the works at least, but has not found a home in a publisher yet. And so I'm hoping that it does happen at some point. And the reason that I would love an expansion to this game is that I felt like the replayability was somewhat hindered based off of the overall strategy feeling somewhat repetitive. I really like the interpersonal connections and tensions that arise from building up the dam, but other than that, the building supply of tiles feels a little limited, and it feels like it's somewhat easy to see all that the game has to offer in just a handful of plays, and that this game can only come out every once in a while to make it feel fresh again. And so I would love some added variability in the building tiles, perhaps some additional modules to add a little bit more complexity to this game as well. But even if they don't, I would love for additional tiles just to be added to the stock to make every game a little bit more variable. Next is Yokohama. This is a game where you are moving around a modular board to be able to gather resources and fulfill contracts with those resources, competing for your influence in certain areas on the board to be able to advance your points. You are also collecting specialized technology cards, as well as different contracts from different countries, and hoping to collect some of those country icons for additional points at the end of the game. This is a really fun game. I've really enjoyed my plays of it. It is a very competitive game as well, and it's all based off of how well you can plan out your whole game, basically, or most of it, based off of the modular setup at the beginning of the game. Now, I think this game in and of itself is pretty well supported with what is in the base game, and so I'm not surprised that there isn't an expansion, and I'm not wholly dissatisfied with the game. I just have drifted away from it in recent times, and I think a little bit of an expansion type of energy could elevate this. And I know a new edition just came out, a new publisher and look to the game I think within the last year has been made, and I'm not certain. I don't think that there is any additional content or anything that has changed from the base game when it comes to what tiles you can play, what cards you can buy, etc. But if an expansion were to happen for this game, I would love to see additional tech tiles, perhaps another country or two that you can purchase from, even if it may not be wholly according to theme, as the theme is set in the Industrial Revolution time in Yokohama, Japan, where a bunch of different Western countries are vying for their influence in the city. And so maybe there were some other countries that were playing a part there, and you can add additional technologies and orders and what have you, maybe an additional resource or two, and ultimately some additional modular boards that you can place down, maybe make the map even bigger, or even cut a few of those modular tiles from the setup to make every game feel a little different. Perhaps just adding, a handful of different tiles, maybe add 1 or 2 of them per game in addition to the modular setup. But in any case, I think that would be a really cool direction to see if this game were to ever get an expansion. Next is Brazil Imperial. Now, this game is a game that is designed by a Brazilian team and publisher, and myself being part Brazilian, I really wanted this game to be something special for me personally. A lot of people really enjoyed this game, as this game tells the history of Brazil in the colonial times, modeling the struggles and the historical events that surrounded the founding of Brazil, all with mechanisms that are found kind of in a similar vibe as Scythe. And so for that reason, this game played very well for fans who enjoy games like Scythe. For me, I'm not the biggest fan of Scythe and the gameplay, and I really wanted to love Brazil Imperial, but I did not get that opportunity to really enjoy the gameplay. And part of the reason is that the Automa module for this game is not available in the United States, and so I have not really had the chance to try that out and kind of dive a little bit deeper on my own with this game. But also, there is an issue with the replayability. I think, for me personally, I think the modular map and the scenario-based approach is fine, but when it comes to the more Euro-style mechanisms and how you garner points, because all the while you're trying to fulfill some objectives by collecting certain pieces and tokens from the game. Part of these tokens are like these painting cards or these historical figures, and there's only a certain number of these in the game, so the variance seemed pretty low as far as what you were able to see and work around with in this game when it comes to some of those individualized cards and tokens. And so I would love to see more of those to add some more complexity and some more depth to this game in what you can see from game to game, in addition to more scenarios and things like that. For me personally, that would elevate Brazil Imperial more and would elevate my opinion of it, of a game that I would love to love even more than I do now. Next is Life of the Amazonia. Hey everyone, this is Future Phil. I do want to mention that there is a mini expansion to Life of the Amazonia. This mini expansion was released as a part of the Kickstarter in 2023 with 8 unique animals, as well as 8 animal cards, sets E and F for the ones that are released in the base game. And so while this does count as a mini expansion, and you may consider this an expansion, my thoughts still are the same in regards to further full content in the future. So thanks. This is a recent game that I demoed and tried and really enjoyed. I think this game, which kind of tells a story of you as an environmentalist trying to build a habitat and rescue these animals and placing them onto your habitat, utilizing animals that are found in the jungle, such as parrots and leopards, etc. And so, theme aside, this game, mostly for its mechanisms of deck building, track advancement, and tableau building, really spoke to me and was kind of a good fit for me when I tried it. I could go back to this game again and have interest in playing this game a little bit more, as it does use a Cascadia-style type of approach to the variance in what you can score in each game. You have all of the same animals that you are playing with in each game. I think there are 8 of them, not including the unique animals that you can draft at the beginning of the game that you have personally to play onto your board. But among all of these 8 different animals that you can play onto your board, they each can have a randomized effect of how they score points and how many points they will score you if you fulfill those criteria. Now, I think additional criteria for these animals would be great, but I think this game would also be elevated if you included more animals to be able to save with additional content as well. You can mix and match some of these animals, not using all of them in a certain game, to be able to provide that replayability. In my opinion, the approach would be a little bit different each game. You're not seeing everything that the game has to offer and that would elevate this game a little bit more for me. You can include different cards, maybe different resources in those in the tokens that you are drawing, because this game is also a bag building tile game where you draw your actions from a bag. And so I guess I misspoke when I called it a deck builder. It's more of a bag builder, but you could have some additional content in those tokens that you are drawing. Another type of resource that could be like a wild resource that you can spend anywhere or advance on a certain track that is new as well. And yeah, so I think there's plenty of room to expand this game, and I think this game does deserve it. It really hit strong for me, and I would totally support this game if I could, and if there was additional content as well. Next is Messina 1347. This is a Suhi game from a couple of years ago that I was really excited for, and I was ecstatic when I saw this game be free to play on yukata.de. And in this game, you are retelling the response that the nobles had in Italy, in Messina, to the Black Plague in the year 1347. And in this game, you are moving around a modular board, very similar to how you do so in Yokohama, but also playing with a personal tableau, collecting these citizens that you are saving, whether they be carpenters or nuns, and if they are sick and get the plague, you put them to work in a quarantine office until they are better, and then they can move around your estate and offer you benefits as you move up tracks. And so this game was really fun, but I felt like it tapered off in enjoyment for me after about 8 plays or so. And this game does include asymmetric boards that you can play with, altering your strategy and approach to each game. So I think if there was ever an expansion for this game, additional boards to play with would be interesting to see. New citizens with different opportunities to work around your estate, as well as in quarantine buildings, and of course different quarantine buildings, and perhaps even different modular buildings that you can put, or tiles that you can put in the middle of the board that you traverse with your player pawn. Would, very similar in my suggestions for Yokohama, I think would make this game even better. I think it would make it a little bit more complex, a little bit more diverse, and not have you kind of feeling like you're doing the same things over and over again, because I didn't get that feeling when faced with a new asymmetric player board. I felt like the strategy kind of felt the same, and once again, I've only played this about 10 times or so, and so I can't speak to those who have really mastered this game and have taken that dive into how this game works, including all of those asymmetric powers. Nevertheless, for me, as someone who has more casually approached this game, but with a lot of enthusiasm, I think having additional content with all of the above, but specifically with these player boards and your estate, to really offer some new strategies and avenues to pursue this game. Perhaps not even that, actually. Perhaps if you have different boards, or a different set of tiles that you can buy to add to your collection or something like that. Something additional to interest your focus, maybe to steer you off of your predetermined path, to make the game feel a little bit more like you can kind of do something else while other players are trying to accomplish something else, taking those precious spots on the modular board, offering you an alternative strategy to either focus your energy on wholly to get more points, or to complement what you are already trying to do. And so that might seem like, as I say it, it seems like it's a theme, and what I would love for additional content is basically adding more of what is already there to give the game more replayability, or at least more variability to increase its opportunity for replayability. But in any case, I think it's still fun to kind of theorize what could be added to these games, what could elevate them to make them a better experience as well. But those are my thoughts on Messina 1347. And last, for this section, for games that don't have an expansion, but I would love to see one for, is Ancient Knowledge. Hey there, this is Future Phil again. So after the recording, I found out that Ancient Knowledge does have a new expansion incoming this year, Ancient Knowledge Heritage. This game, or this expansion, includes 16 solo mode cards that allow you to play a campaign, objective cards that you can place into your artifact slots in your player board, thereby denying you the abilities of artifacts, but also granting you further abilities throughout the game if you fulfill those objectives. And in addition to more cards, builder cards. I think there are 36 of them, and 12 new technology cards, shuffling them into the deck. And so I was not aware of this before I recorded, but hopefully the content is still about the same. So there you go. This was a game from last year that was released onto Board Game Arena, and I was super excited to play this game. And after a handful of plays, I felt like it was pretty easy to understand what was going on in this game. In this game, you are playing cards onto a tableau, which have the unique feature, and of these cards of which, kind of represent some of the monuments and structures that our own, world history, the different civilizations have built over time, or artifacts, things that we have found. You play them onto your tableau in certain spots, and after each turn, they move one space to the left, altering the opportunities that you have to place cards next to each other to activate their powers, but also setting a timer for those cards to eventually fall off. And you're hoping to basically take off these tablet tokens, they're shaped like tablets, off of these cards that are moving on your tableau, because if they are not moved in time before you move that card off, they count as negative points towards you at the end of the game. And so the puzzle of this game is to play cards into certain spots next to each other to maximize their effects, but also to remove all of those negative penalties to be able to score as many points as possible. So I really like the premise of this game. I think the tableau building is fun. The unique aspect of these cards falling off over time and losing their effects and having to rebuild your engine is fun. But after a handful of plays, I felt like I once again saw everything that this game had to offer. The amount of variability from card to card and what kind of effects they have seemed a little limited, and so I'd love to see additional cards that perhaps have some more complex abilities. I know there were cards in the game that have end of game abilities if they were found in your discard pile or something like that, or in the the pile after they have traversed history and fallen off. But it would be really cool to see additional cards that offered some more permanent strategy effects, like, instead of just collecting different icons or colors of monuments, maybe you can introduce some other types of criteria to be able to try to fulfill by the end of the game, to offer some more flexibility in what you're trying to accomplish, and to, change the game in a different way. And it's really easy to do, I think, in games that have a lot of individualized cards. You just add some more of those, tweaking some of those effects to make you look at this game a little bit differently. And so I think there's a lot of potential for that to happen with this game. Obviously, I'm no game designer, so I think there are plenty of people, the designers of this game, who could think of something better than what I'm, saying right now. But I would love to see additional content for this game nonetheless. So those are the main games that I wanted to talk about, but I do want to include a handful of other games in different categories. First, starting with games by Uwe Rosenberg that I think would really benefit from an expansion. I'll go through these really quick. I won't describe the game in an overview, but just kind of go into why I think these games deserve expansion material. The first game is At the Gates of Loyang. This was the third game in the trilogy that followed Agricola and Le Havre, both of which received expansions, yet At the Gates of Loyang did not. This game does include a lot of helper cards, which add a little bit of variability into how you approach the game. However, a lot of these cards are duplicate within the deck, and within a game or two, you've basically seen them all, which I think does hurt this game in terms of variability, which is very prominent in games like Agricola and Le Havre, which have a whole set of different building cards that you can build from and really alter your strategy from. So I would essentially love to see more, variable cards in the deck that you can draw from in Loyang. Or Labora is low-hanging fruit for all of those who know this game. The biggest reason why this game, I think, deserves an expansion is that you can play this game in two different modes, either in Ireland or France, and the resources that you play around with are a little bit different, but the buildings, which are also different from region to region, are played and revealed in the same exact order each game. And so that is a red flag, I think, for those who really enjoy setup replayability and variability in today's modern board gaming world. And so I would love to see an expansion which allows you to mix and match some of these buildings or play them in different eras, or just introduce a new region to be able to do that with, so that you can have a different game play out every time with where these buildings come from, or in which order they come and appear. Reykholt is another game. I think it struggled a little bit with the fact that despite the replayability offer of having worker placement be a part of the mechanism of how you take actions, and the player powers that you can draft or have different from game to game, the goal of this game is to collect different vegetables and to sell them to different customers in a very static way to move across the board and score. It's kind of like a mix between a worker placement newsfeared and the Gates of Loyang customer fulfillment. But these customers are basically static throughout the game, and so you know exactly what customer and vegetable you have to get at the beginning of the game, and so on and so forth. And so a little bit more variability in what customers you're trying to fulfill on that track around the board would make this game a little bit different every time, in addition to more asymmetry and more player powers that could be different from game to game. And in a similar vein, Adiwa is a game that I would love to see an expansion for as well, because the base game is just so much fun to play. It's a big hit for me and my group because it was relatively easy to play but offered a lot of depth and fun. But there is a limited variability when it comes to the terrain cards, as well as I always thought that the round to round objectives for what you're trying to breed felt a little static as well. You always know that you have to have like a bat or like 2 bats and 2 goats or whatever in round 1 to be able to gain an additional resource in each of those respectively in the next round. And so you would know exactly what to do from round to round. I would be interested to see how that would change if those breeding requirements were a little bit different each time. And I do love the solo campaign or different scenarios that you can use to play this game with. That really makes this game feel different as you try to approach a different puzzle each time. But when it comes to the multiplayer experience, I think perhaps it would be interesting to see some breeding requirement changes and variability to make this game a little bit different, and some additional terrains as well to draw from to add some spice to a game that I really enjoy. And then in this last section, games that already have an expansion but I have not played yet and would be interested in playing. I'll go through this list a little bit quicker, but we have Deus. This game is on Board Game Arena. It does have an Egypt expansion that I hadn't heard of until I started making this episode, and so I would love to see what additional content that provides. Clans of Caledonia had an expansion kickstarted recently that I would love to explore as well. I think you can try a demo of that on Tabletop Simulator. Concordia has famously had the Venus expansion add additional content such as team play, additional cards that you can buy from, a different way to score the game at the end of the game, as well as different maps. I've played some of the different maps on the digital app, but have not tried the additional content that is offered in Venus, nor other expansion material that may or may not add cards to. So Concordia is a game system that I would love to explore more. War of the Ring, with the new, or I guess the second to latest expansion in Against the Shadow, which offers a solo mode as well as a cooperative mode to play against the Shadow, against the forces of Sauron. I would love to see how those little changes to the deck make the game feel a little bit different, as well as to offer an opportunity to play this game more, as it, I feel, is a game that you would want to have a dedicated group to playing with, because it requires a lot of mastery and knowledge of those cards, which are static and you play through, multiple times during a single game. Paladins of the West Kingdom has an expansion, or I guess a full expansion and a mini expansion, which adds some variability to the game, additional spots on your board to play with, as well as new attributes to manage as well. And finally, Brass, specifically Birmingham. I think that this game, you could count Brass Birmingham as a standalone expansion or sequel to the original Brass, or now is known as Lancashire. But I would love to see some additional content in this game, whether it is in the form of a different map, different cards, or different types of buildings that you can try to build out with different effects. I think, and I put this at the end because I do believe and have heard that there is an expansion, or at least a standalone sequel to Birmingham that is coming out soon. And so I don't know exactly where I saw it. It was just a fleeting thing that I saw on Board Game Geek, so I would look there. But I would love some more content for Brass, as I recently played it and got really excited to dive deeper into it. So additional content for that would be amazing. So there you have it. Those are the three categories and a whole slew of games that I would love to either have an expansion be created for it, some Rosenberg games that I would think would enjoy an expansion as well, and finally some games that do have expansions out there that I have not played yet. So let me know if any of these expansions, or if there are any games that you think need an expansion as well. If you have played some of these expansions that I haven't, you can let me know all of that down in the comments down below, and I would love to interact with you and find out what your experience has been like. Thank you for consulting with me, and hope that you schedule an appointment with us real soon. Take care. Hey everyone, this is Future Phil. I do want to mention that there is a mini expansion to Life of the Amazonia. This mini expansion was released as a part of the Kickstarter in 2023 with 8 unique animals, as well as 8 animal cards, sets E and F for the ones that are released in the base game. And so, while this does count as a mini expansion, and you may consider this an expansion, my thoughts still are the same in regards to further full content in the future. So, thanks. Hey there, this is Future Phil again. So after the recording, I found out that Ancient Knowledge does have a new expansion incoming this year, Ancient Knowledge Heritage. This game, or this expansion, includes 16 solo mode cards that allow you to play a campaign, objective cards that you can place into your artifact slots in your player board, thereby denying you the abilities of artifacts, but also granting you further abilities throughout the game if you fulfill those objectives. And in addition to more cards, builder cards, I think there are 36 of them, and 12 new technology cards, shuffling them into the deck. And so I was not aware of this before I recorded, but hopefully the content is still about the same. So there you go.